Hey everyone, Joe Healy here from the Highway to Hoover podcast. Just a quick note before we get into today's episode where Mark and I discuss fall exhibitions. As sometimes happens, between the time we recorded it and the time you are listening to this, we had some news that changed some of what we said there. So you may hear us mention during the episode that Oklahoma is not playing any fall exhibitions against outside competition. That is no longer true. They've announced a game on October 25th against McLennan Community College, a very good junior college program in Texas. So that should be a pretty good fall game there. And as we mentioned on the podcast, we're very much looking forward to learning a little bit more about the Oklahoma roster as we get ready for the 2025 season. So I didn't want you to hear that and think that we were just flat out incorrect on that one. That information changed after we recorded. So there is that. With that, enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge. We are here to get excited about the fall. It's the time of year where we are now kind of past the doldrums of summer, right? We're now, everybody's back on campus. Not everybody, most have started at least doing individual workouts. So the machine is kind of groaning to life here. And getting going around college baseball. Actually, we are pre-recording this episode. As you are listening to this, I am in the Midwest, kind of doing a largely non-SEC fall report work. There's just so many fall reports.
Slumming.
That's right. Yeah. This time of year, there's just so many fall reports that Mark and I both have to kind of get out of the SEC a little bit to help out, which I'm happy to do. This is hardly should be counted as work, which is what Mark is alluding to there. But anyways, as you're listening to this, I am currently in the Midwest on a fall report trip. So things are kind of getting going a little bit. Also, because this is pre-recorded, you may have heard me mention this in the last episode. I am battling the flu. I'm feeling much better. Thank you for asking. However, I do still have like a little bit of throat clearing and a little cough going. So I'm going to use the mute button liberally here on this episode. But if you ever hear like a weird pause, it's probably because Joe is having a coughing attack and needs his lungs need to expel something. So if you hear Mark jump into verbally save me, that's probably what's happening there. So just a little bit of a disclaimer there. The flu, not fun. That's my review of it. Just the flu, just as bad as you remember. That's kind of my takeaway on it. So we're going to kind of take a serpentine route. Serpentine. That's my John Gruden impression.
If you do fantasy drafts, you know what serpentine means.
Correct. Yes. You get the last day and the first pick. So we're going to kind of take the lazy river through this thing. But the teams are taking, even within the SEC, taking very different approaches to their fall games. So we will touch on the various different ways they're going about it as we go through this. Let's start here, Mark. There are 3 teams, at least as of now, and we should also say things can change. These are these schedules are pretty loose. So things could change as time goes on. Things could get canceled, things could get added. So on and so forth. But as of right now, 3 teams, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Texas, are not scheduled to play any sort of fall competition, outside competition, and what have you. I think that's more than what we had last year in the SEC. I think South Carolina last year in the SEC didn't play anybody, but unless I'm mistaken, I think everyone else did at least play one game. From your let's put you in the mind of someone running a program, Mark. Like, in what circumstances would you, and this is not to second guess anyone, we're just spitballing, but under what circumstances do you feel like not playing someone in the fall is valuable, or what do you think you get from that or lose from that?
Yeah, if your calendar doesn't line up with theirs. So because you're having, say, a stadium renovation or work done to your turf or something like that, or like last year, Butch Thompson had knee surgery, so he was delayed in kind of his own schedule from getting started. So that can put you behind everyone else and say they're 3 weeks in and you're a weekend. Do you really want to have a game against outside competition? And and you're not at the, on even terms. Sometimes you do that, sometimes you don't, right? But that would be that would be a reason that we've seen. And others just, you have to split reps that way, right? Others like to maximize all of the scrimmages and get everybody as many looks, on the field versus sitting watching teammates. And so sometimes that's part of the equation.
That sounds right. I mean, I think it's also just that I think if you have and I don't know if this applies to any of these three teams necessarily, but I think if you have a younger team, I do think there is value in exposing them to something different. But I do think
Yeah.
there is also some element of like, we just need to focus on like getting these guys into the program and basically onboarded, for lack of a better way of putting it. Like, we don't need to go out and, get too fancy with anything right now. Let's just like get these guys understanding what it is to be in in this program in the
Yeah.
fall. I think there's
Right.
also, and then the flip side of that is one other element here I find interesting is, and I don't have the hard data on this, but I perceive that more major programs are looking to have some of these games on the road, or at least,
Yeah.
or on neutral sites. Like, so just looking at it quickly, Alabama plays at Florida State on October
Right.
26th. Auburn is playing Florida State in Pensacola on
Right.
October 12th. Missouri is playing at Illinois Chicago. Tennessee is doing its usual like traveling road
Barnstorming.
show, I guess, if you
Mhm.
will. Barnstorming, that's a good way to put it. So, I mean, that's just Mississippi State's playing at UAB.
Mhm.
So I think that's interesting, especially if it is something that's increasing in number, which again, I perceive it to be, but I don't know that that's true. And I think there is value there from the standpoint of, I think folks like you and I who follow this stuff but aren't inside the walls of the baseball building,
Mhm.
sometimes maybe like underestimate the value of just like these playing fall games on the road gives you as a coaching staff an opportunity to tell like, hey, freshmen, this is what a road trip is like. Here's what time you
Right.
get up. Here's what you pack in your bag. Here's what time you get to the bus. Here's how
Right.
you deal with a roommate. Like all the stuff that we probably just
Yeah.
take for granted, right? Like, these are 18-year-old kids.
Mhm.
Now, most of them have been playing travel baseball away from home, like all that stuff. That's so that piece is not new. But I don't know about you, but when I was 18, like I would have been pretty like blissfully ignorant about like
Yeah.
how to do a road trip as an adult, right? And so
Yeah.
I do think there is some value in like, especially for, again, you're bringing in 20 some odd new faces to your program every offseason, to take them on the road and show them like, this is how we do a road trip
Yeah, that's a
in,
good point. Yeah.
in a low stakes environment.
Yeah. It's well said. I do think there's value in that. Getting to go to maybe it's a minor league stadium, or go on the road, and maybe there's some opposing fans in the stands. Oh, shudder to the thought, right? We got to play against people who aren't cheering for us. Well, all of that is a learning experience. So yeah, absolutely. And I think the other part of that is just trying to throw as much first time stuff at people as you can, so that when you do that for real in the spring and there's stakes, that it's not the first time, or there's at least that, that experience to draw from. So yeah, I think it's ideally you would play one at home and one away from home, whether it's on the road or at a neutral site or something, right? Vandy's going to Las Vegas. Right, so that's a flight. So that's even more logistics to think about and to experience for the players. So I do think that those are the kinds of things um, that hopefully will help you in the spring. It maybe not on the field, but certainly make your off the field experience go a little smoother, because as a team you've already been through this at least once.
I think what Tennessee does, we talked about their barnstorming tour, and this year they're playing Western Kentucky on October 25th in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And they, at least last year, they played one in Nashville. Maybe they play one every year in Nashville. I can't quite remember, but and then October 27th, so 2 days later, I'm assuming they're just kind of staying out on the road. They're playing Troy, which that should just be a good game in general. Troy is very talented. In Jackson, Tennessee, which is Memphis area. I love that. I wrote about this a little bit in my Tennessee fall report last year, just kind of as like a little aside that, like, I love that idea, especially when you're a program like Tennessee, where it's a relatively big state, but you are the big state university, right?
Right.
The other big brand, of course, is Vanderbilt, but they're a private school, smaller, all that stuff. But and just just the value of, hey, if you're a Vol fan living in Memphis or Northern Mississippi, for that matter, like you might not have gotten a chance to get to Lindsey Nelson. If you got the job and you got kids and whatever else,
it's a long way. Yeah,
it's a good chance to see your team up close. And I saw that last year when I went to their game. They were playing in I forget the name of that, Greenville, Tennessee, perhaps. But regardless, it was kind of in the mountains against Virginia Tech, and like there were just so many families there. I rolled up to that game, I don't know, 2.5 hours early, something like that. And the line was snaking, like the line to get in was just absurd. Now, part of that was because they still had some like standing room only tickets to give away, or to sell. I think they were actually selling them. And so that was part of it, but still, I mean, there were just a lot of people that already had tickets that just wanted to get in at the earliest possible moment. And so not every team can do that the way that Tennessee can, especially with the way that program is rolling right now. But I do like that concept of, because I think it shows a little bit of like, yes, we're going on the road, so you get that benefit. Yes, we're playing good teams, so there's that benefit. But also, I think it shows kind of like an understanding of the bigger picture of how do we be our state's program, right? And serve our entire state. And they're not the only ones that do something like that, but they're the only ones that are playing both of their games in theoretically neutral sites. I mean, you do see some other examples. I mean, certainly there'll be plenty of state fans in Birmingham when they play UAB, right? But that's a different deal. But LSU is playing Samford and Biloxi, right? Like plenty of Tiger fans there. That's not in state, but it might as well be, I guess. Not that far. So that's just an interesting concept, and I think it's cool, I guess, is what I'm getting at. I think it serves the college baseball fan in a way that college baseball fans haven't always been served, because it hasn't been deemed a big enough deal, right? And in college football, you have things like the in the spring and summertime where like the coach, not so much the players, but the coaches will do like a little caravan around the state and stuff like that. And it's a little bit of a baseball version of that, but you get an actual game. So it's a long-winded way of saying, I just think it's kind of a cool concept. And obviously the SEC has the fan bases to make something like that work.
It's a way to grow the sport without giving up a lot, right? Because we see a little bit of that during the spring, but it's but certainly in the fall, I mean, you get 2 exhibitions. If you don't want to play at home, finding a neutral site, finding or maybe it's a nearby opponent to travel to. You're not giving up a gate, really. You're able to go on the road and have a nice atmosphere. Like, I mean, this South Carolina going to Charleston is a fun one for me. I mean, it's on a Thursday night, first weekend in November, playing at the minor league park. They should have a really good crowd. That will be there'll be a lot of people who want to get out and see what, the Pulmonaries first year, what the team's going to look like. It's at the end of fall. That's a fun one. I love those events, right? We're going to play baseball, but it's also kind of the end thing to do. And to be able to have an event like that, kind of like Georgia, Florida, played Jacksonville for years. They're not doing it this year because of Georgia's calendar thing that we talked about before, where it's Georgia starting a little bit later. It just didn't work out. I love that, but Florida's playing Jacksonville, all right, the hometown team down there. And Auburn is playing Florida State and Pensacola, playing in a minor league park. Two really good programs, not that far away. Fans can drive to it. A lot of fans on the Gulf Coast that would want to potentially see those teams play. So that's one the one that's on my list as well. So and then LSU not playing at home this fall. They're playing Samford and Biloxi, and they're going to Lafayette to play the Raging Cajuns. So it's so that'll be kind of different, right? Because you're not you're going to practice at home, but you're not going to play games there. So that's always interesting. It's kind of a different way to handle fall because usually you at least play one at home unless your stadium's not available, like an Auburn or Tennessee. So or Georgia. So I do think that's going to be, um, it's just kind of one of the nuances that make fall games, potentially more interesting, um, but because you are getting some nuance of heading on the road.
Can you imagine how many people are going to be at Lafayette for that game?
Yeah, a lot.
LSU going to the Cajuns. Woof.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, that's. I think there's actually some with some of these games, especially as you were talking, I was thinking about it that Auburn and FSU and Pensacola,
Hmm.
those games where it's neutral for both sides, and kind of equally neutral for lack of a better way of
Yeah,
putting it.
right.
Meeting in the middle, whether that's
Mhm.
exactly true or just metaphorically true. Um, I think there's some opportunities here. I remember talking to um, someone who works in marketing at Florida. I won't shout her out because I don't know that she would want to be shouted out, but someone who works at the baseball program at Florida who does some marketing and merchandising stuff, and she was saying that they'll take merch when they play the game between Florida
Mhm.
and Georgia before the cocktail party football
Right.
game in Jacksonville, which they're taking a year off from, as you alluded to. um, they'll bring merch. And one of the reasons why she said she did it was just because, like, we don't those fans might not get to Condren Ballpark
Right.
in a given year. And like they may not have a Florida on-field baseball cap or,
Mhm.
the script Florida shirt or jersey or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, they might not have pictures with, the mascot, in a baseball setting.
Mhm.
So they bring mascots. So I think there's an opportunity for more places to do that because who's
Yeah.
to say that Florida State and Auburn couldn't bring merch tents and like make a mint off that stuff, like just with stuff they probably have sitting around, like from last season's merch, right? Just because those
Right.
fans, to your point, like might not be being served in the same way. So and there's and I understand that like you're only going to put so many resources behind this, especially because oh yeah, football's happening, and that's kind
Mhm.
of like an all hands on deck operation,
Right.
But I do think for some forward thinking marketing people, which is not you and I'm not telling anybody how to do their job, but I do think there is some opportunity there
Well,
to maybe think outside the box a little more with some of these things.
I mean, especially if there's a home football game, you have a captive audience, right? There are so many of the people are already there on a Friday night. It would or Saturday morning. It would. It's an obvious opportunity to grow your fan base and expose different fans who wouldn't normally be there. Of course, the downside to that is, there's no hotels and there's no parking and there's nobody to work the games and all of that is kind of a cluster. But still, it's there is an opportunity there, and especially maybe I kind of liked what South Carolina did, have it on a Thursday night. A lot of people are there anyway. They're getting into town on Thursday. They could do that, um, and then they could be out by Friday. All right, so some could. So there's definitely some opportunity there to capture on just the fervor and the energy of the football program to expose new fans to the sport. And I went to an Alabama Auburn fall baseball game last year. They played a long game. It counts as one game, but it was basically like 2 7 innings, that they play, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, it had a decent crowd, and people were into it. And of course, they play in tiddlywinks. You're excited about it. So those were, it was a good deal. And Georgia, Florida played in Jacksonville for several years since they opened the exhibitions back up. And that's a huge spectacle on the Friday night before the cocktail party. So those kinds of events, and that's why I mentioned that Charleston and South Carolina game that could, that has potential to be that way. And Arkansas's playing Oklahoma State this year on a Friday and a Saturday.
Yeah, like a
So
little
they're playing
2-game series.
twice.
I like that too.
Yeah, yeah. So they're already in town, right? You're there. You're gonna spend the night anyway. Let's play again the next day. So I love it. Right, two really good programs, not that far apart. Fans can get there. I love it. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? Let's do more of that.
Yeah, agreed. And I think you and I both watched the same video of Dave Van Horn earlier this fall talk about how they had some other fall ideas that kind of fell through. And I had heard about that over the summer and was pretty excited. But I like, with the 2-game Oklahoma State series, some of the other stuff that they might have been working on, like I do like the outside the box thinking, and it makes me think about like the possibilities of, and now we're just having the fun, like let's spitball about ideas kind of game here. But, doing some sort of, four teams go to one site and you just play each other, over a couple days. So, 2 double headers, like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying you got to put it in Globe Life Field because that would be kind of silly, but like,
Right.
could you put it at Round Rock or Frisco or whatever, like a minor league park, and you get 4 teams there, and they play, they'll want to play 12, 14 innings each. That's fine. I mean, it's going to take all day.
Yeah,
But you
and
just
you
play
could
the
do
2 games.
losers play losers, winners play winners, and have a champion at the end, right? So it has
Yeah.
stakes. Fans
Yeah.
love
I mean, that
stakes.
might be,
So,
I get that, that from a program standpoint, you want to control as much as you can control in those situations. I get that, but I do think something like that could be fun, especially if you've got like hyper local talent, right? Like, if you put it in Texas and you could get one of the big brands, Texas or Texas A&M, and you could maybe get a Texas State to be involved, or a Sam Houston, or whatever else, like quality competition could be fun.
yeah, I like that a lot. And I mean, you get these opportunities where you have states like a Georgia. You could have Georgia, Georgia Tech, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, Mercer. Pick however you want to do that and bring them all together. That I think people would at least pay more attention than they do to the current fall schedule like we have today.
Your fall plans, Mark, are a little bit more scheduled than mine are.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm kind of freelancing it a little bit, like kind of doing it on the fly, if you will, in the fall this year. But outside of the trip I'm on as you listen to this, but yours are a little more set in stone. So walk us through what you're kind of looking forward to this fall in terms of things you think you might be going to, understanding, of course, that life gets in the way, things happen, things change. But as it stands right now, like what things are you planning on hitting, and then why are those interesting to you? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, the Auburn, Florida State one in Pensacola, I mean, that's basically a home game for me. It's an hour from my house, so I kind of feel obligated to go to that one. They're coming to me, so I'm going to do that one. I want to see what Auburn's going to look like. Last year didn't go the way they wanted, but they have a really strong recruiting class plus a good portal group, and they've got a lot of the young players that are back. So it's an interesting team for me. And honestly, I mean, Butch Thompson's probably not going to have 2 bad teams in a row. So I'm a believer there. Meanwhile, they're playing.
It's good. I was going to say it's good measuring stick because like Florida
Yeah,
State, like
that's where I was going. Yeah,
okay, yeah, go ahead
like
then,
preseason top 5, right? They're going to be up there.
they are
Very
going to
top.
be a real team next year. Yeah.
Right. So it'll be good to get a sneak peek at them and see what they have as well. Then there's another one. I'm in Mobile, so an hour the other direction. Samford and LSU are playing in Biloxi, so that's kind of an easy one for me to get to as well. See what I'm really excited to see what LSU is going to look like. That is a great group of players that they brought in. Last time I spoke to Jay Johnson, he was really itching to see what they were going to look like this fall because there's just so much talent. He's really excited that they've upgraded the talent based on where they ended last year. Um, and then another one I've got my eye on is the second weekend in November, Clemson and Alabama. That would, Clemson's a great program. They're another one, like we mentioned with Florida State. It's going to be one of the preseason favorites nationally, and I do think that uh, Alabama's got a chance to be really good as well. So especially on the mound, and I'm eager to see what they're going to do. So those are probably the three that I've got. I'm pretty firm on, but after that, it's going to be interesting to see who's where we go from there, because I do think that there's usually I go to the Florida Georgia game. They're not having it this year. I don't think I'm going to go over there to see Jacksonville, but it is one of the that has always been one of the better ones that we've seen. And Joe left us here. So, but yeah, I'm just going to filibuster while Joe tries to figure out what's going on. So I think the other thing, let me tell him what's going on. The other thing is, I think, Ole Miss is an interesting team this fall. They've got two fall games. One's North Alabama, and the other one is with Samford. That's a team I'm really eager to see. That they added some pieces in the portal, but they've got some guys back that should be much better than they were a year ago. So I'm eager to see what they're going to do. That's one, and then I guess the other one we really haven't talked about is Texas A&M. They're going to play Houston Christian and also Houston, and I do think that's one of the. You're talking about A&M. They're one of the teams that'll be interesting to see, just because they've got so many players that they brought in from the portal who are capable of starting. They've got 12 to 15 position players, that would start for a lot of clubs. Where does that fit? Who plays where? And I do think that's that'll be interesting to watch this fall to see how that all works out. New coach, new coaching staff completely. So that's another interesting one, Joe.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of play it a little more by ear, but some of the things that have my eye. I really liked South Carolina's fall schedule. We talked about the road one against College of Charleston. Like, obviously, Charleston, a good program. Also, who doesn't love? the weather in Charleston on November 7th, it's probably going to be wonderful.
It's going to be nice. Yeah,
but also, like, they've got Air Force coming into town, and that's kind of cool, just from the standpoint of that's a program that doesn't really come this direction that much, and it's not a team I get to see a lot, and they've obviously been quite good lately. You look at the talent coming out of that program; it's pretty serious. So, I I'll have to, obviously, Aaron and I be in the same region. We'll have to figure out who goes to what, but I would like to get to one of those at least, to see South Carolina and to see, potentially in either case, another good team. So I like that. I'll see Missouri at some point this fall. It will not be on September 28th against Illinois Chicago, because I'm going to be somewhere else that day. I will be at West Virginia and Xavier that day, actually. So it won't be that day. However, I will see them at some point in the fall, and that's just going to be interesting from the standpoint of, okay, it's going to be the same kind of guys. How much better are they, right? And we won't know until the spring. But I am wondering if, sometimes you come back and you see a guy in the fall, and you're just like, whoa, this guy's this is.
He looks like a different person. Yeah,
right. And so, how much of that do they have? That'll be fascinating for me. So I'll see Missouri at some point. Just won't be in their fall game. And I'm a little jealous. David Seifert's going to see Tennessee. I'm not sure if he's going to be at the Western Kentucky or the Troy game, but he's scheduled to see Tennessee. And I would love to see Tennessee because, like, second year in a row, they're going to have quite a bit of rebuilding to do. Obviously, it went fine last year. I don't know if you've heard, they won the national title.
Yeah,
they're
going to have. They went okay.
Yeah, it went all right. They're going to have to do that again in terms of the rebuilding piece. It's a lot gone. Now, obviously, they've proven themselves. Like, I have every bit of faith they're gonna figure it out, but it will be interesting to see how that comes together and what it looks like early on this fall. So So Sife's going to get a look at that, but I wish I could as well. So I'm sure I'll be at some of these things. Just a matter of figuring out when and where. But that's the beauty of it, though, is that, I mean, we can sit here and go down this list one by one and come up with some interesting things to see. Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of what's cool about the fall. Is one of the reasons why some of us here at D1 Baseball love the fall is just because it's like you just get a chance to see teams without any sort of preconceived notions. You haven't the teams haven't lost any games they should have won yet, right? Like their records are all the same. It's
Hope,
all
right?
hope and upside and like
Mm-hmm.
potential and all this stuff. And so the
Yeah.
injuries aren't bad yet, for the most part. So yeah, so it's just kind of like a more positive times. That's a lot of fun as well. So should be great. It'll be and really, like, honestly, Mark, I mean, I'm sure this is both satisfying and terrifying. I mean, let's see, the latest fall game we have here is the LSU Louisiana game. Well, there's a couple that are on November 10th.
Right.
Florida, South Florida, which is it's a good one. The UL LSU game, and then the day before is when Alabama and Clemson finish or play their game on the 9th.
Right.
But really, that puts us a couple weeks from Thanksgiving. And then I've always said, once you get past Thanksgiving, like we're
Yeah.
full speed ahead to the season. So
Yeah. It's here.
the season is still a long way away. I'm not trying to say like it's not, but it's probably closer than you think,
Yeah.
especially if you're, kind of like we are, just kind of going to dig into the fall stuff and do these fall reports and try to wrap our heads around everything that keeps you busy for a while. Then or like Mark and I are just watching a ton of college football on the weekends. And so that the college football season goes by so fast.
Yeah.
So that, you look up and it's like, oh, we're really, really barreling towards it. So it'll be here before we know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And also trying to figure out, okay, the season's going to be here, right? And then what happens? Because we got 2 new teams in, not just SEC, but elsewhere across the country. Things are just different. So it's going to be a unique season, a memorable season in 2025. And that's really exciting, right? That we're going to go through this. So have no idea what to expect, what's going to be different, what's going to be the same. But until we get to that point, all we can do is think about different ways to tell stories and different ways to keep you guys engaged and understand, give you as much as you can to understand what's going on, within the SEC footprint.
Yeah, a great point about a lot of newness just around college baseball. It feels like we've known Texas and Oklahoma are coming to the SEC. It feels like for a decade now, like not quite, but it has been several years.
Yeah.
But then you look around and it's like our buddies at ACC, at baseball, etc. Darren Vaughn and Danny Graves, they're going to be covering Cal and Stanford next season, which is just silly. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. That's just silliness. But in the Big 12, Arizona State, like those are fun additions to that league. So yes, there's going to be a lot of newness. I think you and I, Mark, are both, as much as we'll enjoy having Texas and Oklahoma in this league, I think you and I are both purists enough that we kind of wish we could just like push everybody back to where they're supposed to go, right? And make it 2010 again or whatever. But given that this is where we are, I do think there are going to be some fun permutations in this game.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and with the Big Ten, right? With Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA coming in, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Do they insert at the top? Do they kind of intersperse?
Right.
What happens?
Yeah, on paper, I mean, there's some, Indiana, Nebraska, talented, but like those are 4 of the most talented 6 teams in the Big Ten, like immediately, for the most talented 7, if you want to be conservative. But yeah, I mean, they are going to be a disruptor in that league for sure.
Right.
So we'll just have to see where it reminds me a little bit, frankly, speaking of Nebraska, when Nebraska went from the Big 12 to the Big 10, and they went from like, oh my God, what's wrong with Nebraska?
Yeah.
To like, oh, this is a Big Ten contender. And,
Mhm,
some of that was they changed, Darren Erstad became the head coach and they got better and stuff. It wasn't just the
mhm.
conference change, but that did play a role that Nebraska was no longer in that version of the Big 12, which at that point in time, it's easy to forget now. At that point in time, there was still a debate about like, is the Big 12 a better baseball conference? Because that's pre
Mhm.
A&M moving to
Yeah.
the SEC, pre obviously Texas and Oklahoma, like those, they were all in the Big 12. So it was still and Missouri at that time was a good Big 12 program. So there was still
Right.
like a little bit of a debate there. Regardless, yeah. So we're gonna kind of be in a lot of uncharted territory in 2025, not just in the SEC, but everywhere, and that'll be fun and confusing and
Yeah.
infuriating all at the same time when we have to watch Cal and Boston College play a conference series.
Yeah,
But
well, they won't start till, 9:30 at night, so it'll give us something to watch while we're
true, it's
riding
going to give
late
us
at night.
TV windows out the yin yang, Mark,
Love it.
for sure.
That
Yeah,
that that part's gonna be good. And I think the other part that we really hadn't talked about is just getting to know Texas and Oklahoma. I mean, we watched them kind of on the peripheral, but now they're gonna be part of the beat, right? So they're gonna be part of it, and we're gonna cover them the same as we do, everyone else. So it's gonna be that's 2 new programs that that are gonna take center stage now that, we really, at least from my standpoint, I haven't really had to focus on that closely. So,
no, agreed.
so that'll be, yeah, I'm excited to kinda get to know some of their players.
Agreed. Yeah, I've already. I look forward to going to Norman in particular.
Mhm,
You know, Austin, I'm just more familiar with because I grew
mhm.
up in the state. I've been to Austin, like so, but I've not been to Norman. So I'm looking forward to that experience. Also, that'll be my opportunity. The Oklahoma baseball online community was all over us for our roster projection that we whiffed on a couple of names, like, and so that as paying penance, Mark and I are going to make individual pilgrimages to
Yeah,
Norman to pay a penance to the Oklahoma baseball fans and hang out. And in all seriousness, like hopefully hang out with some of the Oklahoma baseball fans. Same thing at Texas, like get to know those people because I know Mark, you more than I, because you've been on this beat for a couple decades. But the same way that when you go to Starkville, you go out to the left field lounge,
yeah,
right? And the folks out there, and fans who have been going to Alabama games forever, and you kind of have these relationships, whether with individual fans or just with the broader fan base. And that's one thing I think you and I both, even though I'm more of a newbie at that, one thing that you and I both enjoy about it. And so,
mhm,
in all seriousness, jokes aside about the us goofing things up, like am looking forward to, if you're listening to this as a Texas or Oklahoma fan, coming out to your ballparks and getting to hang out
can't
in
wait
some of
to
the
see
fan
what it's
areas.
about. Yeah,
Right. And I don't just say that because I want free food thrown our direction, although I
although
do.
it doesn't hurt.
Right.
Right.
Like I'm saying I would like that, but it's not the only reason. So yeah, just looking forward to hanging out in those ballparks, getting to know their fans, getting to know the culture of those
Yeah,
fans, the fan bases there. That's going to be part of the fun for sure.
yeah, can't wait.
Should be a heck of a time. But first, we have to get through the fall, and that's what we are looking forward to here. And that is a wrap on that. So that is going to do it for this edition of the Highway to Hoover podcast, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. Thank you to Pitch Logic for sponsoring this and every episode of Highway to Hoover. Thank you to Mark, as always, for joining me, and thank you, the